Hi everybody, my name is Pamela CORO, and in this opportunity I am going to show you and explain you the objects that we can find into a sentence, starting with the direct object, the indirect object, and the oblique, and also I am going to give you some two tips to each one so you can understand better and you can teach them better to your students. First, we have the direct object. The direct object is directly related with the main verb in a sentence. So as the first tip that I have is that in a sentence, the direct object always answers to the questions what or whom. So I have two sentences and they are, John writes a poem. So the first question that I have for noticing what is the direct object into a sentence is starting with what. What does John write? The answer, a poem, is considered the direct object because as you can see, it is directly related with what John writes. The second sentence is the same. Chris sent a letter. In this case, the question, what did Chris send? The answer, a letter, is considered the direct object. The second tip is that we have to notice that the direct object is a noun placed after the main verb in most of the cases. So I drink coffee. In this case, without making the question that is starting with what or whom, we notice that the word coffee is the direct object. I drink what? Coffee. Okay? She studies English. In this case, the word English is also considered the direct object here. The next is the indirect object. In this case, we have that the indirect object is not directly related with the main verb in a sentence. So the first tip that I have is that the indirect object always, answers the questions we have as an answer and object pronoun, in the most of the cases the same as before. Questions such as who to or who for. Here you have, my dad bought me some new clothes. In this case, we can notice that the expression, the noun phrase, some new clothes, is the one that is directly related to the verb bought. Okay, so in the word that is resting to the sentence is me, the object pronoun. In the case, me is the indirect pronoun, the indirect object, of the sentence. The second tip to understand the indirect object is that the indirect object complements the direct object. So if you only have a sentence that is having done a direct object and you want to write more to complement it, then you can write an indirect object. So I paid you the loan. It's like I only can say I paid the loan. But for having more ideas is I paid you the loan. In the case of the sentence, the word you, the object pronoun you, is the indirect object. Now we have the oblique object. The first tip that I have here is that the oblique object answers the questions. Here I have mistakes. The oblique object answered the questions who, to who, for who, and even questions such as where. So I have the example, the message was sent to the president. In this case, who was the message sent to? To the president. The difference between the oblique object and the indirect object is the way that you are answering the questions. So in the before, we have only, for example, me, you, him. But in this case, we have a noun phrase that is a little bit longer. Second tip is, the oblique object is a noun phrase composed by a preposition such as to, for, from. In here, we can also understand better that the oblique object is a noun phrase that is starting with those kinds of prepositions. He has done nice things for me. In this case, at the end of the sentence, we have for me. Not only me, but for me. And just because of the preposition, we understand that for me is the oblique object. Now, let's see some examples, some extra examples. In this case, you are going to have into orange the direct object, in blue the indirect object, and in purple the oblique object. So the school gave scholarships, direct object related to the verb gave, and to the students is a noun phrase that is starting with the preposition to, so that is the oblique object. Second sentence, my mom baked me a cake. where a K is related to the verb baked, direct object, and me is the indirect object. And why is an indirect object? Because we only have the personal, the object pronoun. Third, I take my dog to the park. What is the word or what is the noun phrase related to the verb take my dog? So my dog is the direct object. To the park is a noun phrase starting with a that is starting, sorry, with a preposition to. So to the park, oblique object. And the last one, she loves him. Him is a direct object related to the verb loves, and him is also an object pronoun. It is important to finish this that you notice that in a sentence you're not going to have always an indirect object or an oblique object. And if you have one of them, then you cannot have the other. It means that if you have into a sentence an indirect object, then you cannot have an oblique object or the opposite. If you have in a sentence, including in here the direct object and you have the oblique object, then you cannot have an indirect object. So if you have the indirect, sorry, you cannot have the oblique. And if you have the oblique, you cannot have the indirect object. That's it. Thank you so much for today. And we're finished now. Thank you.